that your health can drive your outcome, can take your passion, your life away from you, it's a warning sign, red flag. We need to dig another layer deeper and find the actual trigger. And if we deal with that, he's not getting it. 8 to 10 times goes to zero. You start to realize it's a $4 trillion machine, truly. 90%, and this is not a random arbitrary number, the actual percentage, 90% of that, $3.6 trillion is spent on chronic disease management. Exactly what we're saying does not need to happen.
All right, listeners, you're getting ready to hear over an hour of impactful, incredible information from Kashif Khan. If you could prevent chronic disease before it starts, if there were simple decisions that we all could make, if we only knew what they were, getting healthy at the cellular level, that's what we're going to learn about here. And it's so easy. Anyone can do it. So I ask you, if you could make only one simple change and add 10 to 12 quality years to your life, what would that mean to you? Let's find out. Welcome to the show today.
Pleasure. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you don't mind, we always start with some history. Would you mind going back and sharing a little bit about how you grew up and what impact that had on you along the way?
Yeah, so the number one thought that comes to mind is my dad was sick and we had no money, right? So he was older. When I was in my teens, he was already near 60. He passed away when I was 17, in his 70s, just approaching 70. And so for me, that was reality. I grew up in this part of Vancouver where there was a massive influx of Hong Kong Chinese because China was taking over Hong Kong in 1997. So everybody was fleeing to Australia, LA, Vancouver. And so there was a lot of wealth around me. And I lived in this little ghetto in the middle of all, right? So all my friends had money and I didn't have, so I could sense what it was like to be secure, but I would go home every night to poverty. And so, but my dad came from entrepreneurialism. He ran businesses, he built business, he just got really sick. And so those two things stuck with me, that your health can drive your outcome, can take your passion, your life away from you. And it's very possible to teeter on the line between wealth and health, both of those things. Because I kept seeing both sides of both every day, every waking day. And that's what kind of drove me to pursue what I did.
Yeah, if you have your health, we have a million wishes and dreams, but if you don't have your health, you only have one.
Yeah.
And that's to be healthy. So you grew up, you're in a challenging situation. You had to overcome a lot growing up. How did you make the transition from there into your early businesses?
So the big aha moment was my father passed away. And I was not intending to start a business. What I intended was to go into engineering to design cars. That's really what I liked. I was really excelling at the time. And I became responsible for the family, 17 years old, right? My mom, my sister, my mom was also sick. She had hormone issues, which I didn't even know about until that time. And so I started working. So I knocked on family's door first and said, how do I work? Where can I work? And my uncle gave me a little odd job and these types of things. And I immediately started reading books about selling and how to market properly, and just whatever book I could read about people that had done things well and all these various skills. Uh, and I started applying them quickly. And I went from literally not knowing how to pay for food to I had warehouses and staff all over in multiple cities and didn't even know how I got there. I was just working so damn hard. Right. So that happened over a period of a couple of years.
And then there was a point in your life where I think maybe you were on a cruise and there was a picture of yourself or something of that nature where you looked at it and you said, hey, I have these things going on, but like, I don't feel very good at all. And
Yeah.
is that what drove you into what you're doing today?
So it was a total system failure. Like I would say about a month or so after that picture, which was me looking at myself saying, wait a second, that's what I look like?
Yeah.
Like picturing myself as my 19-year-old self. And meanwhile, I look like a beached whale. Like what just happened? Right. clueless, didn't realize that that's what I was doing to myself. So I took a step back and like, how did I get here? But soon after that, I didn't do anything about it, by the way. And soon after that, I got really sick. So I got eczema to the point where I couldn't open my left eye. It was sealed shut. I had psoriasis, like spots all over my body. I had gut issues, which were kind of developing, but I didn't pay attention. Uh, and I had depression, couldn't get out of bed, you know. The worst part of all was migraines, so intense that literally I would have to vomit from the pain. My business partner would drive me home. So all this culminated into me and then asking the question, what did I do wrong? What did I eat wrong? What did I breathe wrong? What happened? And I couldn't get that answer from any doctor. And this is in Toronto in the Canadian healthcare system, which is free. So it's great for citizens, but it's like diagnose and prescribe. Here's what your thing is called, and here's the pill you have to take. And I didn't know that until that very day. I was 38 years old. First time I had to deal with that kind of full experience. So my question being unanswered, I did what I did, and whatever I do, I just solved the problem. I didn't accept it. I started learning about functional medicine. I started learning about naturopathy, integrative medicine. I then stumbled upon genetics. And that to me seemed like a real solid scientific explanation. So I started to dive deep. I learned that there were certain parts of my genome that were just missing. Forget about, good or bad. Like I didn't even have certain very important biological processes that prevented my business partner from getting the same illnesses that I did with the same food, same exposure, etc. And I finally understood it. And that's the day where, well, I shouldn't say that's the day. I then got my arthritic mother in a bed. I then got my anxiety-induced niece back to school. I got my friend off of cholesterol pills. That's the day when I said, whatever I've been doing until now has no purpose or meaning. It's just been money. And that's why I was depressed because I stopped getting a sense of reward. And I have to do this. And I literally handed my keys to my business partner and said, you keep this. It's yours. I know what I have to work on.
So are you saying that the tools to get a genome study or to get the testing done was available to you, or it was readily available, but people hadn't really put it together to go get the tests and then design the fixes and the adjustments? Is you had to go somewhere to be able to get the information to help your family members?
Testing it hasn't really changed. So testing is what version of what gene do you have?
Mm.
The interpretation or the application of it is what was broken. So, and keep in mind that billions of dollars were spent on researching the human genome and sequencing in full, but most of that came from the pharma world, and still today, most genetic research is being done pharma-centric, which is disease-centric. How do we find that needle in the haystack that equals a disease? For the most part, the majority of our healthcare spend, both in Canada and the US, is on chronic disease, which you're not born with. You cause your choices, your food, your environment, your relationships, all these things cause these diseases. Which disease is a combination of poor genetic hardware plus your choices equaling some chronic condition. We can get into some of those examples. And so that's what was broken is when I got into my genetic report, like you said, I had some PhD explore it, and it was like 5 different people told me 5 different things. How is this thing that's supposed to be so precise? It's my human instruction manual, so open to interpretation. And what I realized is not the gene results that are open to interpretation, it's the application, meaning that I'll give you a simple example. There was a recent documentary with Chris Hemsworth on Netflix. No, it wasn't a documentary, it was a miniseries called Limitless, where he challenged himself in various things. And one of those, he was told that he has a specific gene called APOE and a specific version that called for an 8 to 10 times elevated risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. And then there's another version of it that calls for a 17 to 25 times elevated risk of dementia. That gene doesn't cause dementia. This is where people get it wrong. Like doctors truly believe the gene causes dementia, but if you ask for the underlying biology, what's the trigger? What actually happens when you have this gene? What's the next step? Why perfect health to cognitive decline? What it actually does is transport lipids in your body, cholesterol. So the efficiency by which you move cholesterol around your body. cholesterol is a hormone that your body uses to fight inflammation. So if you have inflammation in your brain and you send cholesterol there and you have a bad version of APOE, you're more likely to develop plaque because you don't efficiently move it. That plaque will lead to cognitive decline. But the real question is, why did I have inflammation in my brain? Pharma is funding genetics disease-centric. The very last stage is Alzheimer's dementia, which is the plaque. Now, if I can make a pill for APOE and I don't have the plaque, I won't get dementia. No, you'll probably still get it. It's just going to express differently. What we really need to understand is that there's certain detoxification pathways that people are missing. There's certain anti-inflammatory pathways. There's certain hormones that people make too much of, too little of. And if you start to look at that, you find the root cause for the individual. Now, all of a sudden, for this guy, APOE, Chris Hemsworth, was just the priority. It's a warning sign, red flag. We need to dig another layer deeper and find the actual trigger. And if we deal with that, he's not getting it. 8 to 10 times goes to 0. That was what was missing from genetics. And I realized that, again, an outsider looking in became so obvious, but the guys in it, it was just too close to them. They couldn't see it, right? And so I funded that research. Let's sit in front of people. So we spent 3 years studying 7,000 patients, one by one, by one, by one, by one, to truly solve each problem at an individual level. And now I feel we're in a place where give me a problem and we already know what to do. It's like we've seen everything now, right?
So there's a manufacturing saying that says the earlier in the process that you can find a defect, the less expensive it is to fix. So basically, instead of pharma saying, oh, okay, well, you have Alzheimer's right now, so here's what we're going to do to mitigate it, to treat it, to slow it down, go back farther into the process, understand your genetics, and then don't amplify the opportunity for that condition by doing things earlier in your life and more consistently that are going to just slow down or eliminate the opportunity for that disease.
Exactly. I'm dealing with a musician right now. He was a well-known musician in his time. He now has Parkinson's. His daughter is still in the industry. She works with another famous band. And I said to her, we need to work on you. She said, what are you talking about? I'm 40 and I have no symptoms. I said, this is when it starts. Your dad has the genetic wiring for that disease, but some other genetic failure is causing the trigger. We need to see if you have the same problems so that you can start the right habits today to not end up like your dad. Chronic disease doesn't start like a light switch. It takes 10, 15, sometimes 20 years of your body resisting and fighting to eventually get to symptomatic. Crossing this threshold, your body can't fight it anymore. Then it becomes acute. So we can take a 5-year-old child and tell you, here's all of what we see. Here's your GPS. Here's all of the potential things that you need to detour around. And by the way, here's all your superpowers. You want to pick a career, you want to pick a sport, here's what you're actually designed for. And the earlier you start, the more, the better the outcome is because you're preventing and reversing everything.
So I grew up in Chicago, Midwest, and then I moved in 1989 to the South. And the diets in these two areas are distinct. They're different. But they're consistent across your peer groups. So when I grew up in Chicago, me and my friends, we all ate the exact same stuff. Moved down here to the South, it's a different diet. Everybody's eating the exact same stuff, yet we're all different. So when I look at people in my extended family that live to be, that ate, I can't even describe the amount of fat intake that was in their diet. And they were 96, 97 years old, healthy, nothing wrong with them, not taking drugs. And it was unbelievable. And then other people don't make it to 60 on that diet. So basically, from a root cause perspective, we need to invest the time to understand who we are at a unique cellular level, and then take the time to map out. So immediately my thoughts were, Christmas for this year, I'm going to buy all of my kids one of your tests. That's what we're going to do. So I got to get it. I got to do it. And then, we'll sit down as a family when we get back together over the holidays, and we're going to go through it. And so I'm giving them something at an early stage in life that they will always know their genetic predisposition to certain things. they can choose to make an impact. They can choose to adjust their diets or adjust their supplementation, but at least they'll know and in the time to do it. So very excited about that opportunity. So why would this not be a mainstream practice at an early age? Is that the goal of the DNA company? And if not that, then what?
So my first thinking was exactly when you land on this, you think, wow, I'm going to change the healthcare industry. Then you start to work with the healthcare industry.
Yeah, good luck with that, by the way. I've worked with that's a tight group. I'm just saying, it's a tight group.
You start to realize the $4 trillion machine,
Mm-hmm.
truly, 90%, and this is not a random arbitrary number, the actual percentage, 90% of that, $3.6 trillion is spent on chronic disease management. Exactly what we're saying does not need to happen. So try going up against that. The insurance system is not insurance. I didn't understand being a Canadian. I have a government healthcare card. When I go get sick or need medication, I go to the doctor and it's paid for, right? Thought that's what insurance was in the US. And I realized all it is a remote to administer a group of customers for an employer. It's the insurance company is actually profiting from you being sick. Didn't get that until I started to investigate it. So two things happened. I realized that we need to build our own system outside of the system. And you're already seeing this with biohacking, longevity, anti-aging type clinics. So it's being treated as woo-woo, but that is true health. Health is not masking and responding to disease. It's maintaining the God-given gift you have. I was born healthy. I want to return this body in the condition I got it. Why not? Right? If I always make the right choice, I should be able to maintain this and live to 120 with good health, as opposed to the current American reality. By the age of 55, you have a chronic disease. By 65, you have two. You have the last 15 years of your life spent in chronic disease management. 66% of American personal bankruptcies are due to healthcare costs. It's absurd. You know, we have the wealthiest empire that's ever, but it's also the sickest. So we realize that we have to work outside of the system, which we are, and people work with us from testing to coaching to clinical support, all sorts of things. I'll work with, employers, their whole employee base. I'll go apply it to a corporate presentation to make sure that their team knows how to be the healthiest they could possibly be. All of that's needed. But the one thing I just landed on is I realized that there are existing genetic tests that insurance companies deal with, and I'm plugging those into my platform so that I can interweave myself in the system, kind of under the radar, and support people without having to reinvent things. So that's where we're now at.
Cash, as I think about this, it's you kind of blown my mind a little bit because I understand. I've got a partner that was in pharmaceuticals for 25 years, and he has his opinion on it. He's now in fitness, right? Because he wanted to actually help people. He wanted to cure people or help people be healthier, not just keep them um, well enough to continue to take more medicine. But outside of that, think about the food industry. Think about the fast food industry. Think about the grocery industry, where we're going to get these things. It's almost like I read something about salmon the other day. And, I'm thinking I order salmon all the time because I'm under the impression that I'm doing myself a solid. Well, like wild caught salmon is actually a breed of salmon. It's called wild salmon and it's farm raised, but it says wild. So I'm thinking if I order wild, it's going to be healthier. And so there's, you're fighting this battle of commercialism, not only in big pharma, but also in food. And if you're not going to go to the farmer's market and grow your own food, which is certainly an option for you to do, the more you want to invest in your time in being healthy. Now, is that where this concept of precision medicine comes in? Because I've heard it before. It was mentioned in your book, which, by the way, The DNA Way is a great book. It's incredibly well done. It's an easy read for a heady topic. The book, it creates a simple understanding of your cells and how they're constructed and how they function and how the different parts of them are. So it was really great to go through it. So I do want to talk a little bit about the book, but precision medicine, putting ourselves at the center of it. What can you tell us about that as a concept?
So the allopathic healthcare world thinks that precision medicine is just personalized dosing, right? So it's still the same thing, just a precision version of it. What I think it is understanding it's not only precision, it's also personalized, right? So it's precision means accurate. Personalized means it's exactly what I need. It's not a one size fits all trial and error type process. Figure it out through measurement, measure 5 times and cut once type medicine, as opposed to I have a mental health issue and I've tried 8 different pills and I'm still not feeling well. So what we've learned now is through the genome, we don't need to necessarily think about it disease centric. We can think about systems versus symptoms. So if I have your genome, I don't even need to ask you what you're feeling. Right? It's kind of like going to a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner that checks your pulse and tells you got a kidney issue, right? And you would think, well, why are they treating my kidney? I have a rat. Well, that's why you have a rat. So it's kind of the same thing. If you're missing certain, I'll use myself as an example. GSTM1. It's a gene that is protective of the gut. So when you're eating your foods and there's toxins, plastics, whatever coming along with the food, there's a process driven by glutathione, this master antioxidant, that's meant to help you clear those toxins and not enter the bloodstream where they can cause inflammation. I don't have that gene. So it's not even about what version or to what level of I'm like missing, don't have the gene. It's a unique phenomenon called a copy number variation. How many copies of a gene do you have? And it doesn't happen in all genes. It only happens in some of the most important health genes, right? That will determine your longitudinal health. So this is why I had the migraines and skin issues. And because what I was eating that my business partner was eating had a major impact that it didn't have on him because he was able to detoxify what was coming along with it. That one thing can completely change somebody's health outcome. It can literally take or add 10 years to your life. That one thing, if you didn't know it had the wrong habit. So that's precision and personalized. Let's get to the root, the system failure. Forget about the symptom. And when you solve the system failure, there's multiple symptom folks that come out of the central hub that seem to go away because that's the result of inflammation. The inflammation itself is the disease. We need to get rid of.
So as I think about your business model and I think about what we truly need to make this happen, I'm thinking about education. There was a great Malcolm Gladwell book, I forget which one it was in, but it was talking about how people won't say anything to doctors because the doctors are an authority figure. So you go in there, they take the tests, they tell you what their interpretation of it. Heck, sometimes I've gone to the doctor and I'm thinking it's one thing and they tell me something completely different. You don't need any medication. It's a virus, this, that, and the other. Like, how did they know this? I don't know. So, for us, the education that, we have to take personal interest in our own health. And really, nobody's going to advocate for us. We'll have the information, but then we're going to have to. And you've got a private business where you consult with people. So us in precision medicine having the final say is difficult if we're not educated to the point where we can be confident in what that final decision is.
It's amazing that you said that because that's exactly where I've landed after years and thousands of people.
You should have called me years ago.
So it went from needing to make the tool easy to access. That was step one. The thing that glaringly was obvious was that this is way too complicated. If I need 5 PhDs to tell me that my ear is connected to my head, when I could have just read it in a report, right? A gene that drives that, too complicated. So step one for me was making it easy. That you receive something in your email that you don't need help. That was step one. Step two was the interpretation. Now, what are we providing you? What is the information you're actually getting? You already know your ear is connected to your head by looking at a mirror. There's more important things you need to. So filter out the noise and give you what matters and make it applicable in your real world life. What supplements do I take? How do I eat? You mentioned eating fats. Should you actually do that? The genes around that, for example. So we then started doing that. And then I realized we needed to have clinicians support our work. So we went on this sort of mission of speaking at conferences. And I've spoken at so many health conferences, summits, digital summits, to teach at least the functional and integrative world that their precision and personalization is possible now because we have the science. Where did that land me? Is I recently passed the torch and we hired a new CEO. I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, biggest shareholder. And I realized I'm not supposed to do this job anymore. I built it. I'm sort of the innovator. I saw what was needed. And what I keep doing is teaching. That's the biggest gap in the industry is lack of knowledge. Not only the industry, but also for the patient. And that's where I find I'm delivering the most value. Running the business is a CEO's job. So we hired a CEO and brilliant lady who comes from, a couple decades of healthcare experience. So she'll help us integrate into the system. That's what she's good at. And meanwhile, I've started this sort of private practice of my own where I work with entrepreneurs, celebrities, world-class athletes, to help them where they're stuck. And that education, the time that I spend with them is the most, because now it's not just here's the pill. It's I've just taught you how to use your body and I've armed you for life. Because 10 years from now, you're going to be asking different questions and solving different problems. And 10 years from there, you're going to be asking different problems, different questions, solving different problems. You may decide to go hiking. You may decide to take it easy. You might decide to get married. Whatever's happening, there's always a question that either drives you towards health or away from it, right? And the context is going to keep shifting. So if I can teach you how your body works and you're just always making the right choice, I realize that's the most powerful gift I can deliver. So I've started doing that now.
How to scale that is going to be probably the next question. I have an idea, franchising. So, but that because that's exactly what it is. Delivering services to people belly to belly, where in every city and town in North America and internationally. I mean, that's literally what we do. Um, so, in thinking about this, how um, how young is too young to engage in this practice? And if I can go to my own personal family experience, so my father was my father's father died when my father was 14 of diabetes, and then my father had diabetes, and it severely impacted his health. I'm the middle of three brothers. Both my older and my younger are diabetic and are full blown on insulin, and I'm 55 years old, and my doctor's like, "You're in rarefied air. All of your numbers are, 150% of what, but I've done nothing different. I've probably treated myself worse than they've treated themselves, from a health perspective and a toxin perspective and from a food perspective. So, like if we all would have had this information early, could they have pushed off the onset of their diabetes? So you think about this and pushing this down into the earlier you can make an impact in somebody's lives. Like how young is too young? And are there any areas where this technology can be misused? Insurance companies, premarital, like should we even have kids based on our genetics?
So all of that. So first of all, uh, too young is you're not born yet, so it can't get your DNA.
Okay.
Right? But as soon as you hit this planet, uh, I think that's the right time because you're immediately going to start making decisions about vaccinations, medications, environmental exposure, food. Baby food is full of heavy metals. We now have a schedule of 80 vaccinations that children are supposed to get in the United States. The active molecule itself isn't the problem. It's the heavy metals in the serums that are delivered along with it. Then you have this whole argument over autism where, it's absolutely true. The pharma companies are right that the drugs do not cause anything that we call autism. The parents are also right that that's when my kid changed. So please explain it. The day after, my kid was never the same. It's some kids genetically do not detoxify properly, specifically heavy metals. Some kids do not fight inflammation properly. Methylation is what the process is called. Some kids suffer from neural inflammation. That cascade, that trifecta equal literally brain damage from heavy metals being, you have a child whose brain is completely underdeveloped, who's already susceptible to neural inflammation, and then you inject them with heavy metals, and then they get a fever, and their response is give them Tylenol. Tylenol, acetaminophen, the active drug, uses your glutathione pathway to be metabolized, which is the exact same pathway that your body needs to clear the heavy metal. So it's this perfect storm to equal literal brain damage, right? So I'm just giving you this example, one of thousands of things we could talk about that if you knew, you would have made different choices. We had, 2 generations ago, 1 in 10,000 kids autistic. Last generation, 1 in 500. Now it's 1 in 38. And I can tell you genetically, the kids have not changed. What has changed is the input, right? And this is going back to your next question about premarital. There's this phenomenon where one of the highest propensities of autistic birth is in Silicon Valley, because you have these two highly introverted engineer type people mating, right? Having their kids,
Sounds
and
so clinical.
and all of a sudden you're passing on what leads to that type of behavior. It's the neurochemicals and the anti-inflammatory pathways equals this. Here's who I am, typing on a keyboard. Don't talk to me, right? Bordering on neurodivergence already. And now both parents pass that on to the kid who's no longer armed to deal with all the inputs that causes the eventual problem. So yeah, there's a lot of things that, even relationships, somebody's ability to experience trauma. How much meaning do people give things when you have that conversation over and over and over again, not this again, because two people are truly remembering it different. There's a neurochemical called adrenaline, which we know of as like our, when I'm running on the track or fighting or that adrenaline rush. It also is implicit in how you imprint memory. So that adrenaline rush, one of the purposes of it is to give you the warning sign so that next time you don't make the same mistake. Now, some people do this really efficiently, which means that they experience trauma. Not only do they remember the information, but they also remember the feeling, the literal exact emotion comes back the next time they're in that scenario again, talking to that same person, seeing that frown, seeing that color of car, whatever the trigger was. Some people don't do it at all. Now imagine those two people trying to have a relationship. It's powerful to have different perspectives, but there's certain areas that's always going to be friction. And just knowing this creates major relief, because you truly believe you're right and they're wrong until you know that, oh, that's my neural wiring. That's how I see the world. Now I understand their perspective. We can't tell you how many diabetes and weight loss sessions turned into marriage counseling sessions once we started talking about the brain, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I could, the two different types of addiction, rewards based and binging. I could see that, if two partners have similar addictive type behaviors, they could really um, uh, go. It could, if you're both binge addicted, then you're probably gonna goad each other on to be binging on whether it be food or other things like that. So it'd be helpful to know. I guess that's what they say, opposites attract, because you balance each other out a little bit. And um, I know that I'm reading the book and trying to figure out where I am on this and the addiction thing. Being an entrepreneur, the way that I look at rewards and risk. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe the addiction types and how that plays into entrepreneurs? I'm particularly interested in talking about these entrepreneurial profiles that maybe you've seen.
Yeah. So you mentioned at the beginning that I have these entrepreneurial genetics. And keep in mind, I said that interpretation is important here. Why I say that? Because when I first kind of cracked the code and figured that out about myself, I thought that that was entrepreneurial genetics, meaning that's the only way. Then I started to learn by interviewing people. This is what we did, 7,000 people, one-on-one. I learned that there was multiple different versions of what made people entrepreneurial, different reasons, different motivations. And all of them are equally valuable. You just have to understand who you are so you structure things the right way. So take me, for example. Dopamine is a chemical that allows you to experience pleasure, but also reward. So eat some tasty food or achieve something. Both give you that sense of satisfaction by binding and experiencing dopamine. So the biology of that is you have to release dopamine, which is the anticipation. I smell the food, so dopamine starts firing. You then have to bind it to actually experience a pleasure. So I bite into that tasty food. The receptors in my brain bind the dopamine, but genetically, we have different levels of density of receptors. So the actual hardware, some of us have really, really dense Like I experience it way up here, and some people, like myself, have very sparse receptors. So it's actually very hard to feel the reward. Once you're done with the reward, a gene called MAO comes along to break the dopamine down to eventually get you back to normal. And another gene called COMT comes along to clear, like a broom, sweep up that metabolite, right? So I have dopamine way down here, lowest possible, and I have the fastest possible MAO and the fastest possible COMT. So not only do I not feel it, but it's gone like that. This leads to high reward seeking behavior because I can't get no satisfaction. Right? My baseline is depression. And this is why I went through depression. Because when I finally achieved at work and I had money and my mother was taken care of and I got married, I had kids, all this stuff, I stopped trying. And I got depressed because the regular day to day is not good enough for me. Or addiction, because you go down this pleasure route and you find something that gives you that elevated reward and you need it constantly and more and more and more and more because it's never good enough. Or high level of achievement, entrepreneurialism, because again, you could either pick pleasure or reward. You don't need both, by the way. Your brain just needs satisfaction. And this is why you see this teetering of people that are at the top of their game, all of a sudden suicidal, right? Top of their game, also addict, depending on the context. When I'm at work, I'm not drinking, but when I get home, I am. There's a shift in context. I no longer have my reward. So this extreme wiring leads to extreme behavior. And if you understand, here's the machine I am. I'm not a Jeep, I'm a Ferrari, or vice versa. I'm not take a Ferrari off-roading, it's going to fall apart. Put a Jeep on the track, it's going to lose. But it does have a superpower, something that is designed for. And I now know what my superpower is. It's risk reward seeking behavior. So I do that. I give myself the challenges, even something as simple as I need to read 5 pages today. That will stop me from being the addict because I gave myself another challenge, right? Now, the flip opposite, imagine the opposite. You say, okay, well, the opposite person is an entrepreneur. They also are, but for a different reason. Maximum dopamine receptors, very slow clearing. This person has such an easy time experiencing pleasure that they end up becoming flaky. This is the person who's in the meeting with you, nodding their head. Yep, got it, got it, got it. Show up next week. Where's the stuff? What are you talking about? What stuff? Where is it? I did it. You didn't do it. We talked about 10 things, you did 2. They're only going to do the things that they actually truly value and take interest in, as opposed to the reward seeking person that like, I got to do it, got to do it, got to do it, that high functioning anxiety drive. But the things that they do, they're going to binge on and do a better job than anybody. Me, I can only do macro quality work. It's very hard for me to sit there for 8 hours and do it, but I can do 5 things at the same time, right? Squirrel effect. Versus the binger, because their dopamine levels are so high, because their clearance is so slow, they get stuck. They binge in that thing that they enjoy, but it's hard to get them into that state to begin with. Now, we've only talked about the dopamine pathway. There's so many more chemicals that drive this behavior. I could spend an hour just talking about it.
Yeah, understood. What would you say is the most common epiphany that people have when they start working with you in your private practice?
I would say it's exactly this, that the way that I perceive the world and the way the world perceives me is actually nature, not nurture. And I did not know that. Now I understand this relationship. Now I understand this business. Now I understand my children. Now I understand I get it all. It all makes sense.
So we were under the illusion that we were in full control and the choices that we were making were based on logic and the way that we thought about things. But when you get right back down to it, we're hard programmed in certain things for certain tendencies. And if I want to make a change, for example, let's say I want to change from some of my addictive behaviors that I consider to be non-constructive to more addictive behaviors that are constructive. Now there's a pathway for me to implement strategies, supplementation to move that chain over to be more productive. With, like I started the call with, if I want to finish impeccably, and I'm 55 years old, I've done the hormone therapy, exercise, watch my diet. I'm doing all these things, but I'm not really getting the lift on the productive side that I was looking for. So I'm missing something. There's something that I'm doing that is suboptimal, uh, is 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 your work going to give people those simple, common adjustments that they can make that can give them a maximized return on the investment of time?
It's come down to after thousands of people, there's 7 things we need to go through. And if we do those, you're going to be the best version of yourself.
Okay.
You're going to add a couple decades literally to your life. And what are they? Everything around executive function, mood and behavior, and how your brain works. So if you understand that, that's likely half the problem. For people that are stuck in chronic conditions or, aging too fast or not feeling right, a lot of it is how you perceive. So that's a big one. Diet and nutrition at the macro level. Not like eat 3 sticks of carrots and some broccoli. It's more macro, like how do I metabolize fats? How do I metabolize starches? Should I actually be a vegan? Do I produce the enzymes for those things? Micronutrients in terms of supplementation. What does my body actually need and how much and what version? Because you don't need that trial and error. So that's another huge one. Everything around sleep. And this is an area that a lot of people ignore, but we've done a lot of work on understanding the genetic. I can't fall asleep. I fall asleep well, but I can't stay asleep. I sleep through the night, but I don't wake up feeling rested. I'm still groggy. Those are genetically very different things, and they can all be resolved in their own unique way. And when you optimize sleep, everything else gets better. Hormones, neurochemicals, inflammation, all of it, right? Uh, then we look at hormones. So for example, you are taking HRT. What should you actually be doing there? Because there's some, I'm in Toronto, so we work with a lot of NHL hockey players. This is like the mecca of NHL training. And there was this phenomenon where all these hockey players were taking these androgen gel packs. So it's like a pack you put on your stomach, goes in. There's a gene called CYP19A1 that determines how efficiently you convert your testosterone into estrogen. Some of these guys, the reason why they're so big and strong is actually because they make a lot of estrogen. It's counterintuitive. That's what gives you the size. And when you give them testosterone, they just convert it into more estrogen. And all of a sudden, they lose their libido. They got beautiful hair and skin, and they're moody. And it's not giving them the outcome they were seeking.
Yeah, I read that in your book. I was kind of blown away by that.
It's such a simple thing. Like to your point, can we do this simply? It is such a simple thing. It's just ignored because we don't look at things personalized, right? We think testosterone is testosterone. No, not in certain people. Then we look at chronic disease. What are the big red flags for the major health concern? And how do we avoid them? And if somebody already has one, how do we reverse it? I can't tell you how many people we've taken off of pills that are no longer diabetic, that their cognitive decline, we've been able to improve it 20, 30%. Parent who's has dementia is now able to function. They still have it, but we brought back, we've sort of turned back time where they're at, right? Then number 6 is everything about innate cellular health. And this is really the foundation of everything. So immunity, inflammation, detoxification, uh, oxidation, all of the core systems that maintain the health of your cell. What does that equal? The pace at which you're going to age. You can choose. If your cells are thriving, you're going to age slower. If they're burdened, you're going to age faster. Simple truth. And we can understand what your red flags are, what the threats are, so you can prioritize and focus on those. You don't need to do everything that everyone says. Do what your body needs. The last part is longevity. So all of these 6 things I said are reinterpreted for the context of how do I thrive at 95, right? How do I be not in a hospital bed playing with my great grandchildren? Those are truly options that people have if we understand how chronic disease develops. So all of these things we reinterpret to give a longevity context. And then I believe if you do all of this, there's not much left on the table other than optimization. Now getting into like biohacking territory, right? Like the crazy stuff. But this is how you sort of be the best version of yourself and prevent disease.
So it's really all about cellular health and the way that your individual, particular, unique cells function.
Yep. If you bring it down to the top 15 killers in the US, 14 of them are all rooted in inflammation.
Mm.
Same exact thing. It's the same problem. Cellular health. How healthy is a cell? And the number 15, which is actually the number 3 cause of death, is medical error.
Right.
Doctor prescribing the wrong medication and killing you. which is also rooted in inflammation, right? So we can say the top 15 killers are all based in the exact same thing, maintaining the health of your cells, allowing them to breathe and thrive. And we are so close to being in a good bucket or a bad bucket based on our choices. That it's very delicate, especially as you get to 50 and your mitochondria start to decline. By the time you're 70 years old, you've lost 70% of your mitochondria. This is the main powerhouse of the cell that allows you to create your energy, that also gives your cell its resilience. So everything that is constantly fighting, this is why people don't get diabetes at 25 for the most part, because they're still mitochondrially strong and they're fighting it. You're still making the same bad choice, but your body can handle it. The mitochondria starts depleting in your mid-30s, and that's where by the time you're like 50-ish, it actually expresses the disease. So maintaining that cellular health is foundation to longevity.
You made the analogy in the book that the cell is like a chimney. Can you expand on that for the audience?
Your cells are constantly taking in oxygen and nutrition to create energy. That's their primary job. There's so many other things going on, but that's really the root of it.
And proteins, correct? Energy through proteins?
So there's in your mitochondria, there's something called ATP. It's like this store of energy, right? And so proteins become building blocks. So they're more like building blocks. So the actual energy store is called ATP. You dip into it to, release what you derive from oxygen and nutrition. And the byproduct of that, and this is the chimney analogy, is an oxidant. So the irony is the oxygen that gives you life is slowly aging you and killing you. Because in order to use any fuel on this planet, you always create smoke, a byproduct. And so the oxidant, which is a byproduct of oxygen being used as fuel, is meant to be cleared from your cell through a genetic system called SOD2, SOD2, superoxide dismutase, called. Some people are doing well. And when I say some, I would say more people are not doing well here than are doing well. So the ability to clear this oxidation, which means cardiovascular activity, oxidative stress, is actually a bad choice for some people. Some people, we have to tell them that running on the treadmill is the reason why you're going to get a heart disease. Completely counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going, because when I heard you speak about that, that is a compelling enough reason for anybody listening to go to the website, to order the test, and to do this, because conventional wisdom would say, you got to do cardio, you need to be on the rower, you've got to be, on the Peloton, whatever it is you need to do. And for some people, in particular, you reference that there's marathon runners and people that are extraordinarily fit. And the more oxygen that they intake, the faster it's killing them at the cellular level.
And oxidative stress, oxygen intake is one, lack of sleep is one, imbalanced nutrition, meaning not only too much food, but too little, not eating enough, which a lot of people are doing these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Intermittent fasting is fine, but you have to have the right calorie intake when you actually have an eating window open. So all of these things that are potential stresses on the cell, oxidative stress, some of us handle it well, some of us don't. So you'll see, simple example, look at a picture of old marathon runners and you'll see 2 or 3 of them look incredible and 6 of them look like they're like leathered and haggardly, right? Why? Because they prematurely age themselves with all that oxidation.
Yeah.
They probably have, and so the oxidant in the blood now causes inflammation to your arteries, your organs, which then leads to disease. So it's not only external, but also internal sources, but knowing your innate biology helps you make those choices.
Yeah. Sidebar that's going to go nowhere. But when you look at these pictures of these people that were on these ships, like in World War I or coming home or whatever, and you see like 100, 200 sailors and nobody's overweight. Like very, very few people were overweight in the early 1900s, man. And it's now, I don't know that they were healthier. We had probably all kinds of toxins. I don't know if we were eating healthier or what, but man, it is really, we have really gotten very comfortable in especially in the United States with the amount of, the access to, processed foods and things that have the opportunity to, for some of us, manifest as toxins.
we've become comfortable and accustomed to a certain calorie volume and to a certain calorie source, meaning that but it's also we've lost knowledge. Last generation, they knew. 2 generations ago, this is absurd. Nobody would eat the way we eat. Nobody would walk into a Walmart and fill their cart with, you know, a good 90% of what's in that store, right? So we've lost knowledge, and we truly believe that if it's on the shelf, it must be safe. Somebody vetted this thing. If you understood what is allowed in the US versus the EU and China and all these countries that ban the import of American food because
Yeah.
of how toxic it is.
Well, sugar content in cereal, by just as one example, is much higher in the U.S. than it is in other countries.
Yeah, there's an iced tea. Yeah, I try to avoid sugar, but there's an iced tea that I may get sometimes. It has 8 grams of sugar in it. It's not horrible. The same one in the US has 40 grams.
Yeah.
Same exact product. I literally bought it at the airport and I spat it out. I was like, what is going on here? And I read the label, 40 grams of sugar. My daughter, who's my youngest child, we went to Disney last year, and her once in a while guilty treat is a cake pop, sorry, from Starbucks, which I've bitten into. It didn't seem so bad. She had it at Disney, and she said, "What is wrong with this thing? Is rotten." And she was 6 years old at the time. So I took a bite. It was so sweet, and it's the high fructose corn syrup. There's a study that was done where people were fed high fructose corn syrup for I think 6 weeks. Their lipogenesis, production of new fat, increased 600%. 600% on the standard American diet. So the food is such a threat, and it's also a $4 trillion industry. And it's the same owners on top. Seems like a major conflict of interest.
It
You
sure
know, you're
it's oh yeah. Well, if you go up the chain fast enough, there's a small group of organizations and people that own just about everything. So it's there are strings to us. We are all puppets to a certain to the extent that we allow ourselves to be. Things that I avoid, the only things that I really know to avoid are high fructose corn syrup and things like that, and then seed oils. I had Mark Sisson of Primal on the podcast, and really he's big on seed oils too. And they make things taste good, but they're not really that good for you. So
yeah.
I do a cursory scan of a label, and if I can find a product that doesn't have a lot of either of those things in it, that's usually the one I'll pick and go with that. You may or may not have an opinion on this, but I've been having conversations with people, and a lot of it has to do with what's driving the conversations is concepts, private equity, the impact of this on industries that you would have never thought. But Ozempic and this massive wave of people now that can pop a pill, and I guess it is a glucagon-like peptide
Yeah.
receptor agonist. I looked it up to see what it was, but as you look at that, do you have any opinion on that drug and whether it's good or bad for us long term?
Yes, I do. So I think that first of all, it's not needed. I think that and it's misrepresented in terms of what it even does. So what happened is you had a incredible launch campaign, 300 million views on TikTok on its launch because every celebrity was, talking about it, every influencer was talking about it. And so it created this buzz where it was sold out for weeks and not, if not months. And so what is that peptide you're talking about? So GLP-1, there's these receptors in your digestive tract that can turn the dials on satiety, so satisfaction from food, so knowing when to stop. And there's certain foods where your body doesn't think they're safe, so it will turn these GLP receptors on really rapidly to get you to stop eating. There's certain foods that your body's like, oh, I want more of this, so it'll turn the dials down to let you have more. So Ozempic and these products, Wegovy, also they kind of manipulate those receptors to cause you to feel satiety and eat less. They also paralyze your stomach. Like truly, there's people that are having stomach paralysis now because of what it's doing in the artificial sense of sort of manipulating these receptors. Something as simple as a bitter. Literally, there's these Italian drinks called bitters. There's kernels of the insides of seeds, bitter melon. activates the exact same GLP receptors. GLP-1 they're called. So you can take a natural bitter. There's supplements you can buy in the store that are bitters that you don't even need to taste that activate these GLP receptors. This has been known, and this is exactly what I just said, that we've lost knowledge, right? This is not new information. It's been known for generations. Ask great-great-grandma. She already knew that bitters would turn your satiety up. You'd feel full faster, right? There's a gene called MC4R, which determines satiety of the palate. And a lot of us are walking around with a bad version of that gene. And what does that mean? That our ability to get satisfied, not at the gut, but at the mouth, is not that efficient. This is actually a survival mechanism of the past where people would seek out variety to get enough nutrition because they didn't have access to food. Some of us still have that trait with a pantry full of food, right? So why do I bring this up? Because the hack to satiety shouldn't be a drug paralyzing your gut. It should just be creating variety. Think about when you eat Thai food, that wow factor of like, oh, wow, because it's soupy, salty, crunchy. It has lime, coconut, crunchy noodles, soft noodles. It has all of those things.
Yeah, so good.
So it gives you that instant satisfaction, right? Because your brain, the more variety there is, the more you'll get satisfied. So why do I say this? Because we already know genetically that there's ways to deal with this where you don't need a drug, where you don't need the risk of paralysis. You don't need the outcome of you're also losing muscle. Forget about the fat. People on these drugs are losing their muscle, which is so important. It's completely counter to the production of the drug, which is meant to be for diabetics. You need muscle to process glucose and sugar, right? The less muscle you have, the more likely you're going to be diabetic. So it's literally breaking down the root cause and making you addicted to this product for life.
And it's simply because you're decreasing your caloric intake so much that you're kind of wasting away a little bit.
Yeah, you're wasting away. You're truly wasting away. And it works. If you want to hack to lose weight, it works in the worst possible way. There's so many better choices for you. And this again goes back to your genetics. Why does somebody lean on this? Either they're lazy or they're stuck. If they're lazy, there's things you need to do up here, which is why I said it starts with finding what your motivation is. You're probably not lazy. You're probably been offered the wrong motivating factor, not the thing that drives you. For me, I need a sense of reward, right? Some other person may need a sense of ego. Fine. If that's the thing that drives you, use it to your advantage. So step one, laziness is not laziness. It's you've been triggered with the wrong reward. You've been offered the wrong outcome, and then in terms of genetics, you got stuck because you're trying the wrong process. The thing you're eating less, exercising more. What if it's a hormone issue? What if you just make too much estrogen? What if it's a toxin issue? When you're overexposed to toxins, your body stores toxins and fat. So you can't lose weight, right? So you may just be trying to solve the wrong problem. So I've done a lot of weight loss programs with people where we don't do any of the conventional stuff. It's usually these two things in combination. How to make me not lazy anymore, find my motivation, and find why I'm stuck. You don't need those pills. It becomes very easy when you figure out these things.
Well, yes, and that's the education piece of it that I think is missing. People think that, well, we're just stuck. I mean, we're stuck in our habits. We're stuck in our families, the people around us. I mean, for you to make real change in your life, sometimes you've got to switch more than one thing out. I tend to eat better when I'm on the road and I'm traveling because I just like I guess my need for pleasure is satiated because I'm speaking at a conference or I'm working or I'm traveling somewhere new. So I have stimuli all over the place. So I don't need some extra food at night because I just had a long day. I'm under stress. I might not have the reward that I was looking for during the day. So now I'm going to eat poorly at night and go home and it's available and it's simple. So, sometimes you change the window that you're looking through to change the habits and things that you have. I'd like you to do a little visioning here because I'm really interested to know. And if you were to go forward 10 years from now and you get a copy of the Wall Street, what's the paper up there in Toronto? I don't even know. Let's go with the Wall Street Journal. let's say you go to the Wall Street Journal, you're on the cover of it, and the DNA company has been wildly successful. It's changed life. It's done everything that you would have wanted it to do. What would that article say?
So I believe the cause of disease is different than what medicine believes the cause is. Medicine believes it's innate, it's aging. It's just going to happen because you're aging. I believe there's biological processes that make people exposed to what we're environmental, food, etc. The meaning of that exposure is more for certain people. I also understand that the majority of people may not be like your listeners and they're just not going to try, right? So the unfortunate truth is the majority of people won't eat better, won't exercise better, are not going to do it. And it is their doctor's job to fix them when they break themselves, right? And that's so knowing that if I want to truly affect humanity the most, I have to fix the problem, format that affects the most people. So I believe 10 years from now, you're going to see genetic therapeutics where I want a cover of the Toronto Star, by the way, which is Canada's biggest newspaper. And, it's going to say that diabetes doesn't exist, Alzheimer's doesn't exist, cardiovascular disease doesn't exist, many cancers no longer exist, because we now know how to fortify the poor biological pathways in people that they didn't even know weren't operating properly. We also know how to suppress the overactive biological pathways that were making people sick so that the people that aren't going to do the work don't need to, but the people that are willing to do the work can still do that, but also have the clinical answer. So rethinking what medicine is. Medicine isn't masking a symptom. It is recharging the system so that the disease can't even happen. And let me give you a simple example. We talked about the chimney, right? The oxidants. So now I have too many oxidants and they're causing inflammation. There's a gene called 9p21 that determines what the quality is of your arteries. So here's your heart, the arteries around it. The inner lining is called the endothelium. That's where the blood actually touches, the endothelium. We know, do you have stainless steel robust endothelium or do you have paper thin, highly prone to inflammation endothelium? Genetically determined. I already know that by looking at your DNA. So now, what if I could give you a genetic therapeutic that gives the people with the bad version a good version, and they're not prone to inflammation, and they can't get cholesterolemia because I know they're not going to stop eating the bad foods, and they're not going to exercise the way they're supposed to, and they're not going to stop breathing chemicals. So let me fortify their hardware so that they can cope with this new reality we live in. That's where I think things are going to be.
You have a huge task, sir, to get there, because just like Ozempic is impacting some interesting industries. For example, somebody told me this morning that the forecast of tummy tucks and some of the plastic surgery is they're down 50% because people are just taking this pill as opposed to having to go in and have, surgical modifications to their guts and things like that. So your vision is going to require that people are more motivated, more involved, more educated, and I'm sure it's doable because there's enough people like me and you and others out there that are going to go to the DNA company. We're going to get our tests. We're going to understand that a little bit of education is going to lead to a little bit of modification, which is going to lead to a massive improvement in the quality of our life. And then we will implement that to the people that we care the most about, because, that's what we'll do. And it's, very excited about your company and the work that you're doing. And, I'm ordered the test. So we'll start this journey myself today. Outstanding. Is there anything else that you think we should cover that would be important today?
Well, I think that I've been doing this for some time now, right? And first of all, just so everyone knows, I'm not a scientist, I'm a doctor, not a PhD. I'm a guy that was sick, and this is where usually the best functional health stories come from. and you'll see the cancer specialist or the migraine specialist, like they had to heal themselves because everything else didn't work. And then it was so impactful that they started screaming from the rooftops, like everyone needs to know. And that's kind of what happened to me. So why do I say this? Because exactly what you just said, if you actually do it, it's not difficult. We're not saying to flip your life upside down. We're saying you already eat. You maybe already exercise. You already choose what cleaning products to buy. You already speak to your spouse. What if you just did it the way your body was wired to do it? It's not like adding more activity. We're just replacing the bad with good and vice versa. And being at that homeostatic middle place where all of your choices are aligned for your biological wiring. It's a very different way to think about healthcare as opposed to reacting and masking and what can I add? It's like, no, your habits, if they were all correct, you would already be healthy. And the blue zones prove this to us. You have 5 cities where people consistently live over 100. They're not genetically different than us, by the way. There's been plenty of genetic studies on these people. They just have the right habit. And a simple example, the longest health study that's ever happened is out of Harvard. It started in the 1930s and it's still going on. And they're trying to crack the code on what's that one thing people can do that will give you longevity, extended life. And they've been doing this for decades now. And what they've determined, it's the quality of your relationship. They said that's the one thing that we find over and over and over again for people that truly live 100 plus, is they had a small amount of really high quality relationship.
See, I thought you were going towards sweet potatoes, but relationship sounds good.
Well, sweet potatoes, those Japanese sweet potatoes have something in them called anthocyanin. And anthocyanin is a potent antioxidant. That oxidant we were talking about that causes inflammation neutralizes that. And this is a big chunk of their. So if you look at the calories of Okinawa Japanese, it's purple sweet potatoes, it's fermented food, which heals the gut, which is where your immune system is. It's fish, protein to maintain muscle mass and deal with glucose. They also eat, what am I missing here? I'm missing one thing, sorry. Oh, algae, spirit, right? And they eat a lot of seaweed and algae, which has phycocyanin, which is what chemotherapy is made of. It's a potent cancer killer, right? And they've just taken that thing that we could get naturally from blue algae. It's the pigment that actually makes it blue. And they've synthesized it and sell it for tens of thousands of dollars for treatment, right? For elongated treatment, I should say. So that those simple 4 or 5 habits and having the fifth thing, sorry, is this tight knit group of a peer group that they and purpose, what they call ikigai. They have this purpose to everything they do. Their life is designed around longitudinal health without even knowing it, right? So simple habits like that just replace what you're already doing, and then all of a sudden you can live to 100 with good health.
Yeah, I was reading about the blue zones, and I think, and this can be completely wrong, but I think it was about one of the diets they looked at was about 69% these purple sweet potatoes, and then most of the other things were 1 to 3%. So there was a diversity of these different things that they ate other than the sweet potato, but the sweet potato was the predominant piece of their diet, and I found that to be interesting. I love sweet potatoes, so now we've started eating sweet potatoes almost every day. Along with or as a meal, and who knows? But that's the whole point, isn't it? Like, I'm guessing. I'm absolutely guessing. I'm seeing something on the internet, and if it doesn't look like it's going to hurt me, then I'm going to try it. I'm going to see if I feel better. But there's no reason we should guess. That we don't have to guess anymore. I know. One last question. And it could be a big one, but it's just a personal interest of mine. Coding the human genome. What is the biggest lift that we get for that project being completed now?
So the intention, it's more about genetic conditions that are innate, right? So if you look at the research in science, well, first of all, at a high level, we now have a human instruction manual, right? So we know how to read the instruction manual. What is your DNA? Simple terms. Every cell in your body is doing all these jobs all the time. Your DNA is the instruction manual that tells it how to do its job. Certain cells read certain pages. The heart cell only does the heart jobs. Liver cell does the liver jobs. Some cells do every job. So your DNA is just the instructions. Now, the quality of those instructions are based on these variants and mutations. Some instructions are broken. There's a letter misspelled. There's a page missing. Then you can start to understand how well or poorly your body does certain jobs. So the big thing is we've understood genetic conditions. There are some cancers, less than 5%, I would say. Dr. Tom O'Brien says less than 3% are actually innate that you're going to get, right? That are genetic per se. The majority, 95% plus, are caused due to epigenetics, environment, nutrition, lifestyle. So for those, you're going to have a very powerful tool, because all of a sudden this thing that is just part of you, your genetic code calls for it, you can turn the switch off. Same thing with things like autism. The majority of autism is caused, but there is a small fraction which is innate. Children are born with a genetic condition that will be turned off. So that's going to be the big win with understanding what does each gene do, what does this instruction mean, and where are the instructions broken, and how do we intervene with genetic therapeutic thing that I was talking about. The other big one is the utility of it. You're going to be seeing genetics applied in contexts that you didn't think about. Identification, manipulation. There's already artificial womb labs in Europe where they're saying you don't even need to be pregnant anymore, right? And by the way, we're going to alter this child to make it exactly the way you want. There's already biotech companies saying that we don't even need an egg and sperm anymore. We're just going to use your genetic code and your stem cells. So you're going to see different application now that the coding is complete. Some for good, some maybe shouldn't be happening. And that's the other layer of it. There's a company right now, last thing I'll tell you about that. There's a company in UK right now that's saying that they're going to scan your DNA. So when you go to a grocery store, it tells you what to buy. Right. And based on your genetics.
Okay.
So,
well, yeah. See, people will do that.
People will do that. Yeah.
100%.
So we're years away from it, but they're working on it.
No, that's a good outcome. And then our supply chains and everything can adjust for the population, and but that's a big if, Kashif. It's if the companies, the $4 trillion companies, will allow it, because that is counterproductive to a $4 trillion industry. Us being healthy is not good business. Yeah.
I did not know this. I'm 43 now. I started this journey at 38. I had zero insight into the reality of food and health. A few years of exposure and completely opened my mind to every conspiracy theory being a fact, right?
They're mostly true.
Yeah. Not because of just an opinion of mine, because I see it. I'm in it. I see it. It's happening. It's not being disputed. The guys doing it are telling you how they're doing it. It is a clear, very purposeful, right? Do as much as you can get away with. That's really the American way right now.
Yeah. Working with the DNA company, can you just give us a little visibility into the easiest way to do that? Do we just go to the website?
There's a couple layers to this. So just recently, we talked earlier about I've sort of changed my role because I realized what my purpose is. And there's another evolution. I went from startup to building a company to like walking away from my company, finding my purpose. And now I've found an even more elevated purpose. It keeps getting more refined and defined. And what I found is my purpose is to teach, educate, heal. The company can go do its thing to change the healthcare system. We have a great CEO now. So I've come off that. And so there's two things. You can go to the DNA company, you can buy a test, you can learn about yourself, read the reports, and implement. I've also learned that there's so much more that people need, that a lot of stuff we're not allowed to say. FDA won't let us say. We know, but we're not allowed to say without a clinical intake. And there's things that I know that go beyond genetics, because this is what I live and breathe all day, all night, is longevity. Constantly learning, constantly teaching. So I've launched these programs. And why do I bring this up? Because I know who's listening here is more entrepreneurial business, and it's like you also have your teams to think about, your families to think about. So I've launched these to answer your question about the scaling, and I've tested this. I know it so well that I can sit in a group of 100 people online and go through the report where everybody feels like I'm talking to them, right? And I've done this. I've done this with 400 people at one time, right? So so this is where I can build corporate programs, group programs, where I can personally be hands-on and do this for somebody. I just did one in the Dominican Republic of all places for this construction company where the whole family has diabetes and there's depression in the children. They're really well off building mega projects, but the whole family is screwed up in terms of their health. And so we did this group session for all the family, all the executives, and a lot of the team that was in different cities. We all got online. Everyone's lives was changed in this session as a group. So I realize that's my purpose now, is I can, through technology, reach many people at one time, right? And we can, as a corporation setting or a family setting, do things as a group where we all get that value together. So that's my personal website, which I'm sure you can share all this with people after. I'll send you this.
Yep. Or do you want to tell people right now?
Yeah. So it's Kashif Khan, KASHKHAN official.com, kashifkhanofficial.com. Go there and you'll see this like one-on-one thing. What I do right now is I work with a lot of celebrities and athletes. So I have like an annual membership where celebrities, I work with them and I'm like on call helping them. And then there's a group session, but contact me because we can work on something custom. This is us doing what you need, not me saying, here's a product for sale, right? It's like, what problem are we trying to solve? And we'll custom tailor this to make that work. So contact me through there. Then there's the DNAcompany.com, right? If you want to learn more about the science, the testing is there. It's all there. The programs will include the testing for you if you come to me through the program. The last thing I'll say is, again, education is key. Go to my Instagram. It's the same thing, Kashif Khan Official.
It's a great account, by the way. It's so well done. And the little 30-second messages on there, it's on point. We need to incorporate some of that in what we do for sure.
And so for me, it was never intended to be anything other than me venting about what I see in the clinic. You know, we have hundreds of people that keep coming into us say that I have Lyme disease, I have endometriosis. I'm dealing with this. If I were to say her name, everyone knows her. Famous lady that owns one of the world's largest cosmetic companies has been suffering from a female hormone issue for 20 years. Now imagine this lady, multi-billionaire, no doctor that she's paid tens of thousands of dollars to can help her, right? One phone call, we figured out. Literally one phone call. And she's like, why does not everyone in the world not have this? Literally, that was her question. It was just a root cause hormone issue that needed basic supplementation to slow a gene pathway down and speed another one. Otherwise, she would have kept having that problem. So anyways, why do I say this? Is because, like you keep saying, the solutions are simple. The detective work is the most important part, like figuring out what to do. So this is why I've opened up these group sessions, especially in the corporate setting, because I understand it's not just you, it's your team, it's your family. Like as an entrepreneur, these three things have to be thriving for your business to also thrive.
Well, this has been amazing, Kashif. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I've gotten a lot out of it. I know other people will as well. If you had one sentence to make an impact in someone's life, maybe something that you share with you mentioned you had kids. You have a go-to sentence that you would care to share with the audience?
Well, two came to mind. What I say to my kids and what I say to everybody else.
Well, pick one.
What I say to my kids, I constantly remind them, I said, work like it comes from you, but pray like it comes from above. Never lose how humble you are, right? Work as hard as you possibly can, like everything is dependent on you, but pray like it comes from somewhere else and always have gratitude.
Yeah.
Right. So I remind them of that. And I think that's key for me also.
Faith doesn't go anywhere without the works. You got to put the work in. This has been amazing, Kashif. Thank you so much for being on. And we have really enjoyed it. And we will look forward to following your progress and engaging with you further and helping you any way that we can do this great work for all of us.
And awesome to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And I have been and continue to be Jeff Duden. We have been on the home front, currently top 40 on Apple Podcast for entrepreneurship. So if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe, like, Comment if you feel compelled to, and we will definitely engage with you there. And thank you for listening.